Today, our interviewee for the Apex by Private Collectors Club is Ted Gushue. Saying that he is an editor, writer, and photographer focusing on the automotive world only begins to scratch the surface. He used to be a professional DJ, is the current global ambassador to St. Moritz, has released a book on Bentley Continentals from the 90s, and is the founder and editor of Type 7, Porsche's Instagram-only magazine. He's also become a friend, having done a number of events for him over the past few years, and is a man who truly never stops, usually at some automotive event, car shoot, or on a plane, admittedly less so with the current pandemic. Today, we're going to hear a bit about his remarkable life, how he so effectively captures automotive stories, discuss some of his many passions, and also hopefully hear the backstory behind his 1976 Porsche 911S. Ted, thank you so much for joining us, and let's begin.
The pleasure's mine. That's got to be the most flattering introduction I've ever received. I don't deserve half of it. Thank you very much, Charles.
I'm not sure about that. So growing up, you were surrounded by some cool cars in your family. What was your first automotive memory? And was there a particular car which really kicked off your passion?
Well, I came home from the hospital in 1982, 911 SC, Guards Red. Cars were just always a part of my family. You know, we weren't a wealthy family, but back in the 80s and 90s, you could buy incredible cars that were just considered old beaters. So, you know, unfortunately, it's something that our generation now, because of the current speculative market, it's really difficult to do. But my family just always had, you know, we couldn't afford a new lease, but we could afford a gray market two-door Range Rover that was imported by Peter Lavanos because it was just a rust bucket and nobody wanted it. So it was $5,000. So we just always sought out these interesting cars that kind of, how would you say, you know, they were just kind of overlooked by people because they were too high maintenance. They weren't the newest and latest and greatest. And so we've always had cool cars in our family.
Awesome. And you know, for me, you know, as a sort of 4 or 5-year-old, I guess it's my father's Ferrari 328 GTS, and it's one of those cars just carved in my memory. Not only the sounds and the thrill of being driven in it, but also the smell of the leather, which I'm sure you've been in one of those cars, is very distinctive. And I remember there's just weird things like my dad only had one cassette in it, Paul Simon, Graceland, and still to this day it's my all-time favorite albums. It takes me back to that exact moment. My father at the wheel, Targa roof off, bombing around the Cotswolds lanes. So, and do you think it's these shared experiences which bring classic cars from being just an interest into a passion or even a way of life for some people?
Well, so for instance, the car that I drive, the 1976 911S, which you've met a few times,
Yep.
This was the car that I was raised in. So I think my father bought it when I was 4 years old or so, but he paid $5,000 for it in 92. And it was just a car to him. And it was a very cool car, but it wasn't like we didn't think of it as an investment. It was just a cool Porsche that was cheap, and we loved it. And so it's just always been a way for our family to go on road trips, to go to polo on weekends, whatever the event would have been. There was just always something that we were going to in this car. And so, to your point of, you know, being brought back to a memory, it's exactly what it is. Every time I sit in that car, which I still own, I smell the memories, and I can hear the memories, and it's a very special thing.
Yeah. And am I right in saying that cars went back even beyond your father? I think your grandparents were even involved with old cars. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. My grandfather on my father's side, he was a mechanical engineer by trade, I guess is it correct to say. But by night, what he would do was he would buy wrecked cars and restore them. So again, something that's really difficult to do. You would see my grandfather, you know, panel beating on a 330 GTC, and then restoring it, and then driving the hell out of it, and then selling it for a profit. So that was just like his hobby on the side. So my father and my uncle just grew up around incredible cars coming in and out of the house, so that they could be restored, just for fun, you know, just to make a quick buck. Because also back then, when you like totaled your Ferrari or totaled your Porsche, it's not like today where the insurance companies, you know, sort of just take ownership of the product or to take ownership of the chassis, and you're not allowed to touch it. Like, you just kind of had to deal with it yourself. So people would just go list in a local newspaper like "crash Ferrari for sale," and my family bought them and fix them. And it's not accurate to call it a business. Although eventually my uncle started a body shop and restored cars that way, but it was just a cool thing for them to do, and it was like a shared passion for my family.
Yeah, that's very cool. And when I was thinking about how to introduce you for this interview, it was quite tough. Professional photographer, connoisseur of classic cars, watches, cigars, editor of Type 7, writer, media consultant, brand advisor. You documented the awesome Bentley Continentals from the 90s, which I'm a particular fan of. So I used to have a 1996 Continental T, and the list goes on. But what I realized is that regardless of the medium or what you were doing, it seems that the consistent theme has always been about capturing and telling a story. Is that a fair assessment? And if so, what's so interesting about capturing a story?
Yeah, it's probably the way I would describe myself most, is just a storyteller. I've had many great opportunities open up to me because I've sat there and tried to tell someone's story, and it's just led to everything. One door has led to another because of the art of storytelling, and I think it's as old as time. People have a great need to be told great stories. And for me, I saw a huge lack of this being done in the car world. You had traditional magazines that were really, how do you say that? Like just really traditional and quite boring, in my opinion. And so when I joined Petrolicious in 2015 to start as their editor-in-chief, I just was like, okay, guys, we need to really focus on bringing the editorial story quality of the videos that we do. So, obviously, you guys are probably familiar with the Petrolicious style video where they would find an owner and they would, I'm on a bit of a walk here. You would find the owner and you would tell their whole life story through the car. The car became the canvas. And this to me just seemed like the most beautiful concept. And I took that concept and ran with it. And it's always just maintained itself as something that I'm really passionate about. And I've never been able to really sum up what I do. You've made a beautiful attempt at trying to say what my career has been like, but it's been just trying to tell a story and finding that common thread through everything, and finding a way to bring people together through storytelling. I think that's a big part of what's happening in the world today, is that people are losing touch with how similar we all are. And it breaks my heart because I've traveled the world for the last, let's call it 10 years. And I've met so many people in so many places that have such diverse backgrounds. And especially once I got into the car world, I just saw that we were all so passionate about the same thing, and that we all might have differences, like so-and-so might be conservative or liberal or whatever. But at the end of the day, when you step up to an engine, we're just like, wow, okay, that's fucking cool. And that to me was just such a bonding force for humanity. And I can ramble about it all day, but it's quite simple. I just really love telling stories because I think it does the world good.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I completely agree with you about the sort of passionate community element of cars, and indeed it's similar with other things. And I know that when you first moved to New York, you were a professional DJ, and of course, music's another world that's got really passionate community associated with it. From your experiences of both, do you think there are any parallels between the sort of passion in these communities?
Well, I think the kind of passion that comes out at nightclubs at 2 a.m. is a little different than the kind of passion that makes people wake up at 6 a.m. to go to a Cars and Coffee. Those are slightly different objectives, I would say, in those communities. But look, the art of playing music for a group of people and understanding their mood and understanding what they need and what they want to hear and what's going to bring them to a new level is the same to me as editing a magazine or editing an Instagram page or however you want to say whatever I do. It's all the same. It's just trying to understand what people need and then finding out what I can give to them in a very special package. It's to me it's totally equal. It might be difficult to see the connection for some people, but playing music to people that want to dance is the same as editing a magazine.
Yeah. And obviously the most recent thing you've done that with is Type 7, the Instagram-only publication you founded in association with Porsche. And already you've managed to build a large and heavily engaged following. What's your secret to building these communities and not only building them, but also in keeping them engaged?
I mean, there's no secret sauce. That's the beauty of it. There's not like, oh, I've got this one simple trick which allows you to build a community. It's like, no, man, it's about quality, consistency, and care. You know, you have to invest in quality. You have to be prepared to be consistent, meaning you have to be, like, we post 3 things a day. So we give you 3 beautiful things a day that you can consume. And then you have to just really care. And I've been very lucky to have a team at Porsche who approached me about the project before it was even called Type 7. And they cared, they cared about the next generation of Porsche enthusiasts. They cared about a generation of people that don't even think about cars. How cool is that a car company as big as Porsche would sit down and say, we care enough to try to talk to people that young guys and girls who live in cities who don't think about cars at all. And we want to say, look, even if you don't buy a car from us, we still want to hang out. I guess you could make a savvy marketing strategy out of it, but to me, it was a genuine interest to connect to those who aren't even trying to be a part of a car conversation. And they said, we don't even have to talk about cars. Let's talk about architecture. Let's talk about art. Let's talk about travel. Obviously, less travel now, but let's talk about the beauty that's in the world. And I fell in love with that concept. I said, oh, I have to get involved. And at first, it was just me, and then and the team at Porsche, my colleague Franziska Jostok, who's great, and then now we've got a team of 4 people working full time on it. I've got my editor, Nat Twist. He's our managing editor who handles the day-to-day of the publication. Our creative director, Thomas Walk, who's based in Sydney, who joined us from Deus Ex Machina. He designs our books and also does a lot of the photography for us as well on that side of the world. He's really, really talented photographer. And I'm totally blessed. It's a dream project. I couldn't imagine a scenario where a young guy in my position gets approached by his dream car brand to go create a work of art. It's just I'm really, I had to pinch myself to even think about it.
Yeah, and certainly that's something which I think any person passionate about the car industry really cares about. Like certainly myself, trying to get younger people to come into our world and understand the history, pick up the skills, and enjoy the vibrancy of the community. I think it's just so important, because otherwise it will wilt. Do you think you're obviously dealing with sort of the younger generation, targeting, I guess, the under 35s with Type 7? Do you think they're picking up the passion, and do you think they'll be interested in tinkering with like a 60s 911 in 20, 30, 40 years time?
The goal isn't to get them necessarily tinkering. The goal is to even just open the door to the conversation. So we will create a beautiful story about an incredible architect in Brazil. And fans of this architect will then find, because we've tagged them and then the architect reposts it or something, they then see that post and they come in, and then they'll scroll through and they'll see every 4th post is about a young person who has a bond with a Porsche. And they can't help but not look at this person who has this bond and not get it, because we put it together in such a light that it's just really easy for anyone to understand. And I think people can, when they see things in a sympathetic light, it's easy for them to get invested. And that's our goal, is just to say, wow, like, not even necessarily go out and buy one or tinker or whatever, just to be sympathetic and to understand it, so that when you do see a Porsche in the world, it's a positive thing,
Yeah. And over the past, talking of Porsches, over the past couple of years, we've done a couple of rallies together where I've either been trying to chase or keep up with your Porsche 911S, or I've been trying to escape from it. I know there's a cool story behind that car. What is the backstory of that car?
Yeah, so like I touched upon earlier, we're the second owners. We bought it from a guy named Myron Schuster, who's a great collector and a good friend of my father's. And for whatever reason, he just like, I've got too many of these 76s. He's had like 3 of them or something. And he said, Ron, take it for $5,000. My dad paid him $5,000 on the spot. And we were like, and it's really quite straightforward how it came into our lives. But then it's had a pretty crazy story since. It's been rebuilt twice. First by the former speed shop Farnbacher Knowles, which is, sorry, I just got to the top of a hill here, a little bit winded. God, it's so beautiful here. I wish you guys were here with me. It's just stunning.
I wish it was as well.
So the car was rebuilt by Farnbacher Knowles, which at the time was called Speed Sport Tuning, by another guy who passed away recently, actually, a chap named Spencer. Great guy. And so my dad has always just really loved this car. I mean, when I was 16, I snuck the keys, and it really did a number on the gearbox. I think I broke a few teeth off third gear or something, because I had no idea what the hell I was doing. So the car was always just kind of a mystical thing to me. And then in 2015, we had finished the big restoration at Speed Sport in 2014, where we put a 3.2 liter in, and I think there was like a Billy Boat exhaust or something, just a big mean exhaust. The car was really dialed. And my dad sees that I'm moving out to LA to go work at Petrolicious, and he literally just hands me the keys. And he goes, look, this car is going to change your career and change your life, because one, as he rightly predicted, if you have a classic car, it's much easier to talk to other classic car owners. And when I was going to go work at Petrolicious, he understood that if I was rolling up in a classic, it wouldn't be it would make my life a lot easier. And he was totally correct. And it allowed me to very quickly join the Porsche community in Los Angeles, and just really express my sincerity in wanting to be someone to tell their story. And it totally changed the trajectory of my career at Petrolicious. And I could very, very comfortably state that if he had not given me the keys, I wouldn't have been as successful as I was there in growing that community. Because I would have been somewhat of an outsider, I would have been taking an Uber to go do a photo shoot or whatever. It really disarmed people in a way that allowed me to tell their story in a much more natural light. Not that I was like plotting or anything. Looking back, it opened the door to me in a way that was just so natural. And plus, it was, for a young guy who was taking on a whole new adventure, moving to a different coast that he really didn't know. It was a bit like having a piece of home with me, Yep. It was my family in the embodiment of a car, and I didn't feel lonely. I felt like I was just I felt like I had my family with me all the time, and I still feel that. And the car, I've driven all throughout Europe this summer, and I've had it over here since 2017, and it's been to every event imaginable, and it's built all this history with me, and the bond has only grown, which is interesting, because we've had to redo the car again in 2018, beginning 2018. I guess it was 2 years ago now, maybe 3, maybe it's 2017. We, a friend of mine, borrowed the car for 2 seconds to park it for me, and ended up bending the chassis by, it was a stupid mistake. And so then I called my friends at Roof and Pfaffenhausen, Alois and Estonia, and they said, look, don't worry about it. Send us the car. Or we'll pick it up with a trailer and we'll make it right. And they, 3-4 months later, the car was totally brand new. We left the interior as original, but the car was completely restored by hand by Roof. And so now it's got this killer Roof exhaust, and they've done all these great things to it. And it's really just intensified how special the car is. They took it up to 11. Before it was really special to me, but now it's just like, wow, okay. So I've got the history of Roof in there.
Yeah.
And then, because of my location in Europe, I've been able to service the car at some of the best Porsche workshops in the world. Like I did the gearbox at Paxton Page. And there's just all these great little things like that just really add up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And given you're up a mountain, I think we've got to talk about the Alps, and specifically St. Moritz. Indeed, I believe you are a global ambassador to St. Moritz, which I'm not sure how that happened, but what an awesome title. What makes St. Moritz so special? Can you tell us a bit about the car events there, particularly the ice racing and concours?
Yeah, so I first came to St. Moritz in 2017. I was working at Petrolicious still. I believe it was, yes, or maybe it was 2016, whatever it was. You'll notice I'm not very good with dates. I showed up to St. Moritz. I wanted to go there my whole life, and I'd grown up with zero time spent in Europe, so I was an aggressively competitive skier when I was a kid, and it was just one of those places you kind of always dreamed of skiing. And so I come in the summer to go attend the Bernina Gran Turismo, which I think was in its second edition. And I just found this place so magical. I can't even describe it. Like I arrived and I just said, look, they've shut down the Bernina Pass so that the Ferrari bread van and like 70 other of the best race cars you'd ever see at Goodwood can do a top speed FIA sanctioned hill climb. They've got police barricades blocking traffic so these crazy cars can go up it. Then you have then at dinner we'd be in some epic chalet that's been there for 150 years and just eating all this local cuisine. I just immediately, it just hit me how special the place was. And that was before I even really started scratching the surface of all the history there and all the winter sports and the Cresta run and everything that makes it so special. I hadn't even scratched the surface. So I said, look, this is the coolest place I've ever been. So I started posting like crazy about it on my Instagram and on Petrolicious. And at the end of the weekend, I get tapped on the shoulder by a guy named Fabrizio D'Aloisio, who's Italian born, but he's been there forever. He works at the tourism office. He's on the tourism board for the city. And he says, look, we've been sponsoring Ukrainian butt models to come here and take the same picture of holding their boyfriend's hand in the hot tub, the classic influencer, quote unquote influencer photos, and nothing ever makes a difference. He said, you've come here in one weekend and the town's Instagram has picked up 5,000 fans. And I go, wow, that's crazy. I had no ambition towards like trying to impress them or anything. I was just like, this place is awesome. And you'll notice like the work I do on my personal Instagram or my clients or whatever, it's always sincere. I'm not trying to sell you something that I wouldn't buy myself. If that makes sense. So I just sincerely fell in love with this place. And at the end of it, he's like, well, how can we formalize, to make sure that you come back here more often? And, they basically said, look, you really seem to understand the place. Let's have you back here. Let's talk about how we can work more together. So I keep coming back. And eventually they said, we'd love for you to be our first global ambassador so that you can be a testimonial to what goes on here, because it's difficult to understand it unless you go there, unless you see it in person. And if you see it in person and like if you come with me to the right restaurants and meet the right people, everything, it's a magical place. And I just said, how could I turn that down? And so they gave me a little identity card and all this stuff. And it's just, it's not like they pay me some crazy salary or something. It's more just like a nice invitation for me to spend more time there. And over the past few years, I just say, this place just rocks. So after this crazy period on Earth, the past 6 months, I said, look, I'm not bullish on the situation. I know that people that were in the Alps during lockdown had a very nice life. And for me, being around nature is really important, and being able to hike or ski or whatever. I really needed to be happy. And so I lost my lease in London on this great houseboat that I was renting from a friend of mine. She very rightly had to increase the rent. And so I said, let me see what else I can get for my money. And I happened to be in St. Moritz for a meeting, and I said, let me look at a couple of places just for fun. I opened the door to the first place, and I'm like, okay, sold. It's so cool. It's like the coolest little 2-bedroom with 3 balconies overlooking the lake, and it's got all the wood paneling and very typical Engadine style. And I said, okay, cool. I'll hide out here for a year and work from there.
Could be worse. And And moving on that theme about coronavirus, you recently posted a photo from, I think it was Porto of a building with a saying, "A smooth sea never made a skilled pirate," which really resonated with me, given these last few months with coronavirus. You're normally non-stop traveling, barely in one country for more than a day. You make Phineas Fogg look sedate. Obviously, this has all changed with coronavirus. How have you dealt with such a drastic shift? And have these past few months changed your outlook at all?
Well, my biggest philosophy is that every crisis is an opportunity. I've lived with inconsistency in my life forever. I didn't come from money. I had to work for everything I had. I had access to opportunity because of the privilege of where I was brought up. But it wasn't so much that the success was not guaranteed to me in this life. So I've always dealt with, uncertainty with a very positive outlook, because when things are uncertain, that's when cracks open up. And cracks are when you can kind of wedge yourself in and find out a whole new way to exist. So I was nocturnal for the first 2 years living in New York, DJing. That was a whole different life. And then I was a management consultant for a year, working for NASA and Dow Jones. That was a radically different life. Then I was a nightlife reporter, working for a newspaper, going to every party in New York City for a whole year, meeting everyone I possibly could. A radically different life. Each one of these was an opportunity that came out of the previous one, not going through a crisis, but just reaching its endpoint. And so I, by the nature of the path I've been on, every time a chapter closes, for me, it's for a reason. And the last 3, 4, 5 years, I have lived in airplanes, and I've seen more in this life, I think, than in my relatively short period on this earth than many ever will get to. And I'm so grateful. But if the world says to me, "Sorry, we're closed," I'm not going to sit there and cry looking at my suitcase. I go, "Great, what's the opportunity here?" And I go, "Okay, now the opportunity for me is to really start investing in places that I really want to be." And because of the strength of my passport, luckily, despite my country's best efforts, I can very comfortably move around Europe. And for me, the places that make me happiest are Italy and Switzerland. And I've been to so many places. I've kind of evaluated how I just naturally feel when I'm in that place. And so for the summer, I'm here in Sardinia. And then after the 15th of September, I'll be in St. Moritz. And then we'll see where the world is in 6 months. I'm not there is not a single part of me that says, "Oh man, like I'm sad not to be in the first class lounge of JAL, Yeah, all of the travel was wicked. And I really love, actually, it's not true. I do miss Japan. Japan is the greatest experience in this life. But honestly, I've really kind of pivoted to focus on being happy, healthy, and rediscovering exercise, which is something that really kind of fell off when I went through this travel period. As you know, when you travel, it's not easy to kind of stay on the ball, and you end up drinking, and you end up, whenever you go to a new place for 3 days, it's like you boom, 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 as opposed to, okay, cool. How can I focus on being really a local for the next 3 months and learning how to live that lifestyle? So yeah, that's been my pivot. If that makes sense.
One of the things I've noticed that might be one of these new doors openings, that you've been posting quite a lot about some boats recently, and we chatted about boats briefly last night. And certainly myself, growing up, a friend of mine had a cigarette racing boat for many years before buying an Apache, which I just loved. Such a cool thing, blasting around the south of France. And I see that you've done a number of posts about magnums and all sorts of cool boats. What's your interest in that world?
How could you not be into boats if you're into cars? Yeah. It's to me, it's such a lateral, obvious move, because the shapes are just as sexy. The stories are even crazier. The chances of death are way higher for the people that were competing in them, and they often did die. So for me, the narrative is it's right in tandem with classic car racing and classic and just the evolution of the automobile. And truthfully, I see the boat community as being really bad at storytelling. And I just kind of keep looking at it and I go, why is no one talking about this? Why is no one talking about XYZ boat? Why is no one talking about that? You know, every once in a while you'll see someone post about the Ferrari speedboat from the 30s. You know, you'll get a post here and there, but the community isn't as structured as the car community. So I'm just sitting here looking at this just incredible history, and I'm like, guys, look at this. This is just bonkers. And so my friend Guglielmo Miani from Laurus Miani, he's invested in a shipyard, and he started restoring the Monte Carlo offshore 30s from the 80s, which is the first design that Carlo Riva did after he sold the Riva company that he founded, or that his family founded. And so now I've been helping them doing the communication on this project, but basically they're doing full resto mod versions of these really killer boats that are just so much fun. I mean, the thing is like a Ferrari on the water. You can't really explain it any better than that. And we've just been screaming all around Sardinia and Porto Cervo and the Costa Smeralda this summer, and just talking to all sorts of people about it. And it's just a really fun adventure.
A lot of fun. And I'm conscious of your time. So to end with, we have some quick fire questions. So firstly, automotive hero.
Automotive hero. Jenkinson. Or is it Jenkinson? I always forget how to pronounce his name.
Jenkinson.
Dennis Jenkinson. This guy for sure. Jenks was it's just, if there's anybody that I've wanted to model my life on, it's him. I mean, that guy defines buying the ticket, taking the ride, and telling the story. You know, who else would just get in a car like that with Sterling Moss and just go, you know what, fuck it, I'll navigate.
Yeah.
and win.
Yeah, insane.
And to live to tell the story. So I think that guy deserves all the credit in the world for, without him, we wouldn't have these legends. You know, you would have newsreels and all this stuff, but that would be at the finish line. But this guy was in the car at every step of the way, with the most iconic people on earth and the most iconic cars. And he's the reason why they are iconic. And he's the reason why we have those stories. Yep. Without him, I think the classic car world looks very different.
Yep. And then favorite camera?
Well, I'm very biased towards Leica because it's the cameras that have really helped shape my career. I shoot the M10P right now, which is a really great addition from my friends over at Hodinkee, the watch blog, or the watch magazine, and they did a great limited edition camera with them. And it's been just a fantastic camera, and it's really it's helped me shape my style as a photographer, and it's constantly teaching me because it's totally manual, and I've always just loved their cameras. But you know, they're not cheap, so I tell people, if you're going to buy one, you got to be using it. For me, it's a business case, but a lot of people who have the dough will go and buy it, and then it'll just sit there, which I think is a crime. You know, you only buy the stuff you need.
Yep. And then modern or old ultimate Porsche. I
mean, I own it. I already own it.
Okay, that's a fair answer. And last question. So money, no object, excluding your Porsche, free car garage.
Well, I'm building right now a Fiat Panda 4x4, the Series 1.
Great choice.
We're fully restoring that with we're redoing the full interior with all the fabrics of my buddy's company, Laurus Miani, and big fur seats and all this stuff. So that's going to be my little kind of St. Moritz weapon for the winter. And then my 911 for sure.
No, excluded.
Excluded. I'm a huge fan of the 996 GT2. I think this car is just such an animal, and I'd love to own one. My friend James Marks just bought one the other day. I'm very jealous. Not an envious guy, but this is one 911 that I'd love to own someday, because I think it's just it's one of the last of that era that really could kill you. these modern cars have so much traction, so much grip, so much technology to keep you on the road that I'm just like, well, I don't even, it's the you're on rails essentially. With this GT2, it's just really trying to kill you. It's super cool. I love it, and I've always loved the 996 styling. I guess because it was probably the first modern Porsche experience I had. Right, my dad borrowed a friend of his C4S Cabrio, and we just had an amazing weekend with it. He and I, and my brother, and that's just a very important car to me. So I've always loved the 996 style. And then last car, so we've got the Panda 4x4 sorted. We got the GT2. I don't know. What would be the last car? I drove a friend of mine's original Le Mans history E-Type, D-Type. And this was really an incredible experience. I did about 140 miles an hour in it. And it just felt like it wanted to go further and further and further. And it was to have that experience in a car of that age was really quite moving to me. So if cost is no object, sure, would love to have a D-Type.
Great choices. And certainly I would love D-Type Panda, GT2. I wouldn't be complaining. So excellent. Well, Ted, thank you so much for your time. That's been absolutely brilliant. And I'm sorry for we disturbing your walk up a mountain. I hope that all goes well. And look forward to seeing you hopefully in the next couple of months.
Yeah, pal. We'll get you over. We'll get you through the tunnel and come over to the mountains this much. I'm sure you'll be needing. I have a feeling that we're all heading back towards a very strange fall, let's say.
Yeah, back to the cabin. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Well, Ted, thank you so much, and see you soon.
Cheers, pal. Bye.